Please rewind this cassette.
Hey guys, welcome to Box Office Addict, my weekly show where I look at the weekend numbers and sort of talk about where movies are at right now. This is episode 92. We're getting very close to episode 100. 100. I don't know why I said 100. Episode 100, which I'm very excited about. I'm hoping I can do something special for episode 100. I'm going to go with a live stream. Let's just say guaranteed episode 100 of Box Office Addict will be live. There also might be a live episode done when Rise of the Skywalker comes out, just because there's going to be a lot to discuss. A lot of you are going to be asking me questions about the movie and what I think about its performance. I would highly recommend the David Stewart video that was just uploaded. Star Wars Rise of the Skywalker will be a success, where he breaks down that despite everybody trying to put it on this film that it's going to be a big financial disaster, or even a critical disaster, which is more possible, I think, than a financial one. I think he makes some really valid points as to why the film's going to perform well, even if a lot of us out there wish it wouldn't. But I honestly don't care one way or the other. It's fucking Star Wars. Like, I'm over it. So I'm going to do a little something different here. There was no new big opening this weekend. So this is one of the reasons I quit doing Box Office Addict weekly for a while, is because this is what you run into. After a point, when new movies don't continue to open, you're just covering films that have already been out for a little while, and you're just talking about what they did over the weekend at the box office. So some people wondered, well, why did you quit doing Box Office Addict every week? It's because of this. I'm just going to be telling you the updates on Frozen 2, Knives Out, Ford v Ferrari, Queen and Slim, A Beautiful Day in the Neighborhood, stuff like that, instead of having something new to digest. So I'm going to take a little side detour here at one point, and we're going to talk about the Golden Globe nomination, so I don't have to do a separate video for that. So if you just want to hear the box office, let's get that knocked out here so you can know where it's at, because I know some of you use this show as a way to keep up with it, because you know you don't want to go look at the website yourself. And we'll then look at the Golden Globe nominations, and I'll give my analysis of that. As you know, I'm one of those award season whores that loves it. I love watching Gold Derby, although sometimes I want to be on Gold Derby and just like, shut up, you motherfuckers, they don't know what you're talking about. So let's skip a lot of the bullshit here and just get to the stuff that really warrants being talked about. So let's talk about where Joker's at. Joker made $1 million this weekend. It's at the end of its run. Now, if you know the Golden Globe nominations, Joker is coming off of a Best Motion Picture nomination, a Best Director nomination, and a Best Actor nomination. So this bodes well for its Academy Award chances. Joaquin Phoenix is still the front runner for Best Actor. I think if this movie didn't exist, Adam Driver would be locked up right now, even though he's in a cancer culture situation because he was in the military and they found something he said when he was 18 years old. But the movie is at $1.055 billion worldwide. This is a movie with a $55 million budget. I've read it's higher than that. I've read this budget was 70 to 80 million, but who gives a fuck? It's made so much money, it ultimately doesn't matter. So really the star here isn't that just that domestic total, which is huge. It's that international total. The fact that you can make a movie on this budget and the Joker as a character, and you can make something that makes $723 million. Like, let's bring up Suicide Squad here for comparison's sake. Suicide Squad made $746 million worldwide, and everybody was like, whoa, this is a huge success. Even though it's like one of the worst reviewed comic book movies. Then you look at this film, and the international number is just about the total of the worldwide finale of that movie. So this is just great marketing, great promotion, a great idea for a movie to make money like this. I think Marvel should take a cue from this. I know it's going to sound crazy, like, well, Marvel doesn't need any help, but it's like, no, you can make more profit off certain projects. Not every single one of your films has to be a $200 million movie or a $150 million movie. You could do some smaller scale stuff. I'm not even saying you have to do R-rated like this. You could just do something for $50-60 million, and it could still make $1 billion. And maybe something that's a little bit more grounded without breaking the Marvel formula. I definitely think this movie makes a good argument for that. Now, this is the Joker. He's such an iconic character. Could you get the same kind of box office from a Lex Luthor movie? I don't think so. I don't think a Magneto movie would make this kind of money. The Joker's a weird one where he's about as famous or as iconic as Batman himself. And it's like he's transcended the page to become such a mythical, iconic character that basically, if the Joker's in your movie's going to make money. That's all I get from this. Is like we're going back to Batman '89, Dark Knight, Suicide Squad, and now this. Every movie the Joker's been in so far, a mainstream big Hollywood movie, has made money. I mean, Mask of the Phantasm didn't do well in the '90s, but that had to do with other things. I don't think it's because of the quality of that film. That's arguably still my favorite Batman film. So I'm saying going to the Oscars, this movie has a good shot at Best Picture, Director, Cinematography, Adapted Screenplay, and of course Best Actor. So even though critics turned on it, which is interesting because when the movie first premiered at Venice and their first reviews came out, I remember it had like 86% on Rotten Tomatoes. Then it dropped down to like 78%. Then after all the controversy happened and I started seeing reviews pointing that out specifically, then all of a sudden it had 69% on Rotten Tomatoes. So I don't even really know if the critical reviews reflect the reception of the movie. I do think people like this movie overall. I don't love it. I'm not in love with it like a lot of other people are. I think people have a lot of bias they're putting onto the movie. They're projecting a lot of, I need this movie to be great for some kind of political validation. But that's just a opinion I have. I'm not saying that people don't just enjoy this movie. Okay, so we're going to skip up a little bit because I don't give a shit about any of these movies. And let's talk about A Beautiful Day in the Neighborhood. After that terrific hold last weekend, and this is really the sign of the weekend, was those Thanksgiving openings and holds really dropped after, including Frozen 2, quite frankly. Last weekend, this movie had such a good hold, it was like, oh, cool, this movie could make $80 million. And it's going into the Oscar season. Very well-reviewed movie. But it had a big drop this week, and this is not a good sign for this movie. 55%, 5.2 million, 43 mil domestic. So I'm just going to say the word of mouth on this isn't terrific. It does only have a budget of 25 million, and we don't have any international numbers yet. So there's still a good chance this movie could make over $100 million worldwide. But I was hoping with last weekend that this was going to continue, and the movie was just going to make 80, 90 mil domestic. It looks like right now $60 million domestic is about the best they could hope for, even with Christmas coming up. And that's really going to boost this movie, is the Christmas season. So I don't know what to say. Maybe they should have just opened this on Thanksgiving, and then they could have rode that wave a little bit more. But disappointing. Same for Queen and Slim, which had a 44% drop, which isn't as bad. This movie's actually doing relatively well. $6.6 million, $27 million so far. I don't know the budget of this film. I can't imagine it was a huge budget. It looked like a film with a smaller scale, not like a $50 million movie. I'm assuming they spent $20 million on the movie, but I don't know. But it looks like so far this film has a good shot at over 40 mil domestic. So all things considered, it's actually holding pretty well. Okay, Ford v Ferrari, 6.6 million this weekend, about a 50% drop. It's at 91 mil domestic. This movie will make $100 million. Hold on, let me click on that again. This movie will make $100 million. We were getting more international numbers now. It's at 168 million worldwide on a budget of 97 million. So this will also pass 200 million worldwide. I think they need to reach 250 million for this to look okay, because that budget is high and you have to think about marketing. I don't think there's going to be a large profit off this film. Even maybe no profit at all. So far, they can't be at the break-even point with that budget. But this film could have been a bomb. So otherwise, you got to think about if it breaks even, if they don't lose any money, and then it gets a bunch of Oscar nominations, and maybe they win an Oscar for, let's say, sound editing, and perhaps they win the one for sound mixing, although it looks like 1917 is going to win that. I think 1917 actually has a lot of momentum right now, and it hasn't even opened yet. So if that turns into a big hit, but this isn't bad. They probably hoped it would do a little bit better at this point, especially after the opening week, and I think they were hoping this would make $300 million worldwide. But the movie's not doing bad. It's just a crowded marketplace, and this movie only has so much interest. It was going to have a top. It was going to have a ceiling. Knives Out had a pretty steep drop after its massive opening, which really, it overperformed. So the second weekend really isn't reflective of the movie. That was an overperformance with that 41 million and the 27 million dollar weekend. So it has to back down a little bit because it just did so well on its opening. That was not a reflection of this movie being some huge blockbuster. It was just the time of release and all of that. It's still doing really well. You got to remember, this movie only cost $40 million. So it has $14.2 million on this weekend, and it's at $63 million. So this should be able to make $100 million. I don't know if it'll make much more than that. But with the $40 million budget, it doesn't really matter. So far, it's made $124 million worldwide. I would say $200 million is very likely at this point. So Lionsgate should have a pretty decent little profit on their hands, and this movie could very possibly get a screenplay nomination, a costume design and set design nomination, and maybe even supporting actress nomination at the Academy Awards. It did get quite a few Golden Globe nominations. It's not going to be Rian Johnson's most successful film financially, obviously, because he made a Star Wars movie, but this should be able to be a more successful film than Looper and his other works, and it's certainly one of his better reviewed movies. So there you go. Knives Out is doing very well. I would say the studio is very happy with the results of this movie. I would be shocked if, they're like, oh my God, it's only made 120 million. A big thing like that is to get a cast like that and keep the budget low. But then you have to wonder, was there's back end on this movie? Like, how much does Daniel Craig get off of this movie's profits and so on like that? You have to think some of those actors, they probably didn't get big paychecks. I doubt they paid Daniel Craig $10 million to be in the movie. I doubt they paid Jamie Lee Curtis $5 million. So I'm assuming there's some back end involved with this movie when it makes money that they all get paid. This is good for Daniel Craig because Spectre underperformed domestically in comparison to Skyfall and only made about $200 million. But now we have the No Time to Die trailer by Cary Fukunaga. And I guess the hope here is this puts Daniel Craig back in the limelight a little bit more. If he has a $100 million film, which Logan Lucky didn't do well either, this will help going into next year when the new James Bond opens. And hopefully it can do those Skyfall numbers again. Hopefully it can make $1 billion. I mean, the film still made $880 million, but they spent $250 million making it. So luckily, if they can keep the budget on No Time to Die lower, and they can keep the hype going, because I honestly thought the trailer looked pretty good. It looked really derivative of Skyfall, though. It looked like the same movie, but maybe that's what they were going for. I don't know. It looked like the most James Bond movie in a long time. So let's talk about Frozen 2. This movie is doing terrific internationally. It didn't hold as well this weekend with that $85 million second weekend, but $35 million in your third weekend is nothing to throw off. 60% drop, 338 mil domestic. So this will pass the first film, which made $400 million domestically, but that film was more impressive because it had such good holds over a period of time. This film had such a big opening and second weekend that a lot of it was front-loaded. You also have to go into the holiday season. This is going to be playing over Christmas and holding very well. So $500 million domestic is definitely where it looks like this is going to end up, and it's made $584 million internationally. I think $900 million is very possible, if not $1 billion internationally. So we're looking at like $1.2, $1.3 billion worldwide, and Frozen 2 continues to be a major hit. So far, I've read the budget was only $150 million, which was the budget of the first film. So if that's true, they've already made a lot of money off of this movie. And then you have to think that they have the soundtrack, and then they have the merchandising. So this is going to be one of the big profits for Disney this year. Especially, if they kept that budget low. I'm actually really impressed if they didn't spend $200 million on this movie. Maybe that's because they already rendered a lot of that world in the first movie in the computer, so they could go back to that world again and not have to spend extra millions of dollars because they already have a lot of that stuff designed, which is something about animated films. That's why they all get sequels. Parasite's at $118 million worldwide. It's going to pass 20 mil domestic. That's very impressive for a foreign language film. Doctor Sleep is at like $70 million. So that film, I guess, officially is a bomb with its $50 million budget. Let's check out Terminator Dark Fate real quick. Charlie's Angels is already out of the discussion. It didn't even make 20 million. That's one of the biggest disasters in a while. $258 million worldwide for Terminator Dark Fate. That's fucking horrible. Okay, so let's look at the Golden Globe nominations real quick. Best Motion Picture Drama, 1917, which snuck in there recently, as it got rave reviews for its cinematography and Sam Mendes' direction. It looks like Roger Deakins has a good shot at winning cinematography. The Irishman, which is obviously a frontrunner right now, Joker, Marriage Story, and The Two Popes. By the guy who directed City of God. Haven't heard from him in a while. I remember at one point everyone was like, this guy's the next Tarantino. But Joker was the real surprise in that. But I don't know if that necessarily reflects its Oscar chances because the Golden Globe splits things into a comedy, musical, drama category. Best performance by an actress in a motion picture, obviously Scarlett Johansson, Saoirse Ronan for Little Women, which is also getting raved on, which I thought was inevitable. I think Little Women is a sleeping giant coming into the award season because I think it has a good shot at making over 100 mil domestic and being an even bigger hit than Lady Bird. And I do think that going into the Oscar season, it's going to have a lot of momentum. Remember, the Oscars are earlier this year. I believe they're actually in January. Or February. They're gonna be earlier than they normally are, so it's gonna be a shorter award season than we typically have. Charlize Theron and Bombshell, Renee Zellweger and Judy, who's the front runner, and Cynthia Erivo and Harriet. And seems like she has a lot of momentum going too. Best performance by an actor: Christian Bale, Antonio Banderas in Pain and Glory by Pedro Almodovar. Which is awesome. I think Antonio Banderas has a good Oscar chance. Adam Driver in Marriage Story, which I will be doing a review of this week. I just watched the movie last night. Joaquin Phoenix in Joker, and Jonathan Pryce in The Two Popes, which is the biggest surprise here is that Jonathan Pryce was able to sneak in here. Because The Two Popes, we don't really know how that's going to perform during the Oscars. Joaquin Phoenix is definitely the front runner and has all the momentum. That could change, though, come Golden Globes night. Like, let's say Antonio Banderas or, Adam Driver wins that night. That could change everything. But so far, it seems like Joaquin Phoenix has it locked up, and the industry loves him. It's his big comeback role. Even though, I think he deserved the Oscar for Her years ago, and he wasn't even nominated. Musical or comedy: Dolomite Is My Name, Jojo Rabbit, Knives Out, Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, and Rocket Man. I would say Once Upon a Time in Hollywood has this locked up. Actress in a motion picture, musical or comedy: Ana de Armas and Knives Out. Fina? I don't know. Fina. That's how it seems. Aquafina. The Farewell. Kate Blanchett. Where'd You Go, Bernadette? Beanie Feldstein. Booksmart. Emma Thompson. I don't think, the Booksmart girl or Emma Thompson are going to be in the Oscars. Best performance by an actor in a motion picture, musical or comedy: Daniel Craig, Knives Out. He will not get nominated for Best Actor at the Oscars, but this is a very nice Golden Globe nomination. Roman Griffin Davis from Jojo Rabbit. Leonardo DiCaprio, Once Upon a Time in Hollywood. I would say he has a good shot at an Oscar nom, as well as Taron Egerton. Eddie Murphy, it's still up in the air. He could win this, though, at the Golden Globes. I feel like they might just give it to Eddie Murphy just because, he's trying to make a comeback, and he's hosting Saturday Night Live this month. Animated feature: Frozen 2, Lion King, Toy Story 4, Lion King. That's fucking funny. Missing Link and How to Train Your Dragon. You would have to think Toy Story 4 has the momentum from a critical standpoint, but Frozen 2 is the juggernaut at the box office. Foreign language film. This category is actually fairly competitive when you think about Parasite, Pain and Glory, and The Farewell being in here. And I could definitely see Pain and Glory being an upset here over Parasite, or even The Farewell, although I would still say lean on Parasite because it has the momentum going into the Oscar season. Actress in a supporting role: Kathy Bates and Richard Jewell, the new Clint Eastwood movie. Annette Bening in The Report from Scott Z. Burns. Laura Dern in Marriage Story, which I think if it wasn't Laura Dern, she wouldn't be getting these nominations. Jennifer Lopez in Hustlers, which I think is going to win at the Golden Globes. And then, of course, Margot Robbie in Bombshell, because Margot Robbie's going to get nominated for every movie she's in now. Sort of like Jennifer Lawrence a few years ago, Margot Robbie is Hollywood's girl right now. And I don't really have a problem with that. In fact, I like Margot Robbie more than I like Jennifer Lawrence. Supporting role: Tom Hanks, Beautiful Day in the Neighborhood. He should get an Oscar nom. Anthony Hopkins, Al Pacino, Joe Pesci, Brad Pitt. I think Brad Pitt's still the front runner because I think Pacino and Pesci are going to cancel each other out. I think any other year, Pacino would be the clear front runner. Or Tom Hanks even, who hasn't won an Oscar since the 90s. But I think Brad Pitt, because he's never won an acting Oscar, he only won an Academy Award for producing Best Picture for 12 Years a Slave. Director, this is a big one. Bong Joon-ho got in. That's a good sign for the Oscars. Sam Mendes for 1917. Todd Phillips was the real surprise here, getting in for Joker. A lot of people, I think, thought Greta Gerwig would get in here for Little Women. Martin Scorsese, obviously, for The Irishman, and Quentin Tarantino, Once Upon a Time in Hollywood. This could be reflective of the Academy Award nominations, although I think they're going to get a lot of backlash for not nominating a woman. I'm just guessing that. I could be wrong. Although no one's giving them credit for nominating an Asian filmmaker like Bong Joon-ho. Because they're going to be like, oh, they gave it to Ang Lee before. So, yeah, I don't know if Todd Phillips is going to get that director nomination at the Academy Awards. I feel like he's going to get canceled out by Greta Gerwig. Noah Baumbach not getting a nomination is also not a good sign for Marriage Story, which has a lot of momentum in the writing and acting categories. It feels like if some of these other movies hadn't come out, Marriage Story would have just won screenplay, actress, actor. But it feels like it's going to lose to Parasite. Scarlett Johansson's going to lose to Renee Zellweger, and Adam Driver's going to lose to Joaquin Phoenix. It's just this bad luck. But best screenplay, Marriage Story, Bong Joon-ho, Parasite, which I think is the front runner. Anthony McCartan for Two Popes, Quentin Tarantino, Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, and Steve Zalian for The Irishman, which I guess they don't have the adapted original screenplay separation here. So that makes this interesting, because at the Academy Awards, The Irishman would be an adapted screenplay, and I think it's the front runner, where Marriage Story and Parasite and Once Upon a Time are original screenplays. Original score, Alexander Desplat, who gets nominated for everything now. The Joker, Randy Newman. I'm a big Randy Newman fan. That is a great score. And then Thomas Newman for 1917. And then Motherless Brooklyn got in there. Best original song, Cats. All right, I'm Gonna Love Me Again, Rocket Man, Into the Unknown, Frozen 2, Spirit, The Lion King, Stand Up, Harriet. I'd say it's between Harriet and Frozen 2, although I'm going to lean on Frozen 2. But with the Hollywood Foreign Press, it's hard not to think that they'll go with Harriet just because they like that. So that's overall my opinion. It's a very male-dominated Golden Globes category. Little Women did not get in there, although that's really the only female-directed film that I think has a shot at any major Oscar wins. Parasite might have underperformed slightly in the acting categories, and I think it's going to be underappreciated in that sense. I would honestly give, The Father Best Supporting Actor. I think the movie is still my pick for Best Cinematography, although it feels like 1917 is going to win, just because it all looks like one continuous shot, and Roger Deakins is coming off the momentum for Blade Runner 2049, and it would be cool to see Roger Deakins win a second time, just to be like, oh, sweet, okay. Lee Smith edited that film, which I think is interesting, coming off Dunkirk with Nolan. I think that's very interesting. It's almost like, hey, I want to do Dunkirk, but I'll do it like it's Birdman. So it's very male-dominated. My guess is that Once Upon a Time in Hollywood's going to win comedy, musical. Irishman, I think, has a really good shot at winning Best Motion Picture Drama. I think Phoenix is probably going to win. Renee Zellweger's probably going to win. Supporting actor is either going to go to Brad Pitt or Al Pacino. Supporting actress, I think Laura Dern or Jennifer Lopez. Most likely Jennifer Lopez at the Golden Globes. I don't really know at the Oscars. Although Hustlers was a hit, and Marriage Story's on a streaming platform. But they might give Laura Dern the Oscar just to give Marriage Story something. Animated feature, I think Toy Story 4 most likely will win that. And when it comes to Best Director, that's the real competitive category here. And in my view, I think that I would like to see Bong Joon-ho win, and that'd be a good sign, but it just feels like they're going to give it to Scorsese. I just have this vibe they're just going to give everything to Scorsese this year. That's how it feels right now. Even though, as you know, I don't love The Irishman, but I feel like the Golden Globes especially want to give Scorsese the award. And then when it comes to screenplay, that's a tough one, because it could be Marriage Story, and it could be The Irishman. I think that's honestly the most competitive category because they put the adapted and original together. I'm going to lean on Parasite or The Irishman winning, but don't be surprised if Marriage Story wins that. So that's the Golden Globe nominations. As for this weekend, all we can really take from it is that Frozen 2 continues to be a dominant storm at the box office. some of these other films that are very well reviewed and doing decent at the box office, none of them are blowing up right now. Knives Out didn't do better this weekend. Ford v Ferrari, it keeps going down and down. Beautiful Day in the Neighborhood is not doing as well as maybe we thought from last week. And so really, it's still the Disney dominating the medium and the theaters with this one film. This one film's probably going to make more profit than all these other films put together, even though these are, more original films and more adult-oriented films. But what are you going to do? Who the fuck was going to compete with Frozen 2? We're not too far off from Star Wars, man. We're coming up on Rise of the Skywalker. That's going to be a very big deal, I think. What is it, like we're like 2 weeks away? A week and a half away. So some reviews should be coming out for that too, so I'm interested to read that. But Knives Out is a success. Ford v Ferrari is a success. Basically, the whole top 5 is doing fairly well, with Beautiful Day in the Neighborhood sort of being the slight disappointment here. Tom Hanks really does not have the box office pull that he once had, and it's very obvious. Although nobody really has the pull they used to have. Matt Damon and Christian Bale, I think a few years ago, if they'd been in a movie together, that movie would have made $200 million. They've both faded in and out over the years. So yeah, the story is still Frozen 2 right now. That's why it sucks to do this show sometimes, because you end up repeating yourself. And we're just seeing a repeat of this, and I think it's going to continue this way throughout December. It's going to be these big tentpole movies. I do think Little Women is going to be a surprise hit because the book is so big, and I think it's going to play well with female audiences. I could definitely see that movie opening to 25-30 million, and I think 1917 is going to perform really well too. So I'm excited to talk about those movies and how they're going to perform over the holiday weekends. And even if they don't open great, they should hold very well. And it's all going to be surrounded by this Star Wars thing, which is just going to be a can of motherfucking worms. But thank you for listening to Box Office Addict. I will see you for episode 93, where we will be talking about more movies. And hopefully something new and exciting comes out that I can actually do a real analysis of.